A note for listeners, this episode deals with the subject of suicide. If you are thinking of suicide or know someone who is, help is available nationwide by calling the Canada Suicide Prevention Service toll-free at 1-833-456-4566 24 hours a day or by texting 45645. And the text service is available from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. here in Saskatchewan.
I would say everybody has something in their heart that they're carrying that is niggling, that is something that they can't wrap their mind around, that is something that they can't reconcile with, that they're having difficulty with, and they just don't know how to get or crack that on the head.
Hello, I'm Eric Anderson. The voice you just heard belongs to Jill Cowan. She is the featured guest in episode 5, season 4 of YXE Underground. Jill Cowan and her family understand the devastating grief that comes with the death of a loved one by suicide. Her 16-year-old son, Max, died by suicide in 2015, and you will hear the impact it had on her and her family. But you will also discover how Jill used Max's death as motivation to help create a therapeutic program for people who have been in her shoes. We'll learn more about Jill Cowan and the Healing to the Max program in this episode of YXE Underground. During my years with CBC Radio in Saskatchewan, I spoke with a few families who had been impacted by suicide. I was always nervous when doing these stories because I didn't want to say anything that would upset a family, or I wasn't really sure how far to push when asking questions. The families were always wonderful to speak with, and I thanked them for it, but I was always a bit uncomfortable. I was feeling the same way when I reached out to Jill Cowan, co-creator of the Healing to the Max therapeutic program for survivors of a loss by suicide, to be on the podcast. She's doing such important work in our community, and I really wanted to share her story on the podcast, but I just wanted to be sure that I was telling her story with respect and kindness. I emailed Jill with my request, and she quickly wrote back to say yes. And then she said in the email, quote, "I want to assure you, Eric, that you have free range to ask any questions you may have. You will not, quote, cause myself more pain by asking myself to speak about anything related to my experience of losing my 16-year-old son by suicide, the effects on myself, surviving children, husband, extended family and friends, and later, the creation of our programs of hope and healing. Though I may express emotions during our discussion, I want you to know it is an honor as a bereaved person to have opportunities to speak in an honest and relatable way. Please structure your questions on anything you think will resonate most with your audience, and I'll participate openly. I know people will gain a lot by tuning in." I wanted to share this with you to give you a sense of how kind and empathetic Jill is. She has put her heart into the Healing to the Max program, and it is helping people in our community and beyond. Healing to the Max offers therapeutic grief supports for adults that have lost a child to suicide and for youth and teens ages 11 to 19 that have lost a family member or friend to suicide. Jill is the co-creator and one of the program's facilitators. This work is personal to Jill, and she truly wants to help people who have experienced loss like she and her family has. We met a few weeks ago on a sunny but cold afternoon at Ancient Spirals Retreat just south of Saskatoon. It's a special place for Jill as it's where she held her first adult support group, and she had the room set up as if we were hosting a group. The fireplace was on, the sun was shining through the south-facing windows, and round tables were set up throughout the room with art supplies and various activities relating to the program. I sat across from Jill in front of the fireplace and started by asking how it felt to host that first group.
It was really special. It was exciting, and, as much as one can be excited about working in the capacity of grief support, but I was excited, which is to say that we were in the position to offer people support, and if they chose, if they were ready in their healing journey to connect with fellow survivors, we were able to provide that. It was just incredibly special for all of us.
I'm so curious what happens when you get people together, and I know things have obviously changed with COVID, and we can get to that in a bit, but before that, when people could come to this room that we're in right now, what happens here, Jill?
Well, the program is led by a group of facilitators. I am one of them. I'm a parent survivor of loss by suicide. We also have my co-creator, wonderful Anjanette Corbet, who has her master's degree in social work. And when we lost Max by suicide, she was finishing her master's degree. And she took everything that she could, any conference, any sort of specific training on loss by suicide. And so when we created this program, our hope was to create a community of support where people can come and they can connect with fellow survivors. And we can meet on those terms of equality, where we don't have to explain anything to one another. You know, you're just in this supportive, empathetic environment. And so I know I'm the creator of the program, so it's so hard for me to sound like I'm being genuine, but when I say that people come into this room and when we first meet them, it's the hardest thing for them. It's the hardest thing for them to walk through that door. Because nobody wants to be in that position. Nobody wants to be, have that, literally it's a door in your face. It's their reality now. They are a bereaved by suicide person. And so when they sort of rip off that first Band-Aid and they come in, they're just met with such warmth and such caring and such a level of understanding that it sort of gives them a place where they now belong. That community of belonging. It's so special. Speaking as a survivor myself, one of the worst things for me was, and you and I have met, Eric, and we've had a little brief chat, and we have been communicating online back and forth with one another. I'm a pretty friendly person, and one fear, one sort of prevailing thought that I had when I was newly bereaved was, oh my gosh, I am never going to make a new friend. I am never, ever going to be, somebody is never going to want to meet me again. Nobody's ever going to want to know me.
Why? Why did you think that? Like, where did that come from?
Oh gosh, I think just because it's so uncomfortable to be a bereaved mother. I remember, for example, very recently after we lost our son by suicide, walking through my neighborhood, my husband would tie my shoes for me, and once a day he would make me go for a walk. And I would be out in my neighborhood, and I didn't feel like talking to anyone, but I would just be coming down the street that I had lived on for 17 years, and I would just see the garage doors go down. When people were out in their yards and they were working, I just sort of felt that it was now uncomfortable. People didn't know what to say to me, and I didn't know what to say to them. And the stigma of this type of loss, that was another compounding factor. For example, one lady I was working with at the time, I had decided to I made the decision rather to go back to work quite quickly, which was about 2 weeks after we lost our son. And she came to me on the first Monday back, and she said that she had a brother who struggled with mental wellness, and that I was now her worst nightmare, and she could no longer work with me. So I think some of it was not knowing how to navigate my world. I think a really big part of your identity as a parent is being that child's mother, that child's father. That's how you're known. Those children who are friends with your child identify you as Max's mom, and they're not even aware you have a first name. And so your whole life and hopes and dreams are wrapped up in this person who no longer exists. And that's really, really isolating. I think there's so many complex layers to this type of loss. But one of them is a loss of identity, a loss of self-esteem, a loss of direction. I remember describing it in my early days as feeling like I'm a newborn baby. I'm completely helpless, but yet I'm in an adult body, and I had no idea where to start. And so when people, I understand what I felt at the time, and I did a lot of journaling, I did a lot of writing. I started an online blog. You met my husband, he's from Scotland. And so there's an 8-hour time difference, sometimes 7, sometimes 8, depending on their time change. But it was really hard for them to keep in touch with us and know how we were doing. So I thought if I, document our experience and how we were coping, how we were getting on, they could just kind of go online, they could check in if they felt like it. It also was a method for me to look back, right? It was kind of like I knew I was never going to remember what those early days of bereavement were like. There was just no way. So I could write it down and I could go back and I could learn from this. And perhaps that could help someone else somewhere down the line. So I know what it's like to be newly bereaved, and I know what it's like to have no idea which direction to go in. So when people walk into this room and I can, I look at them and I acknowledge how difficult it is that they've made this decision. They've made this decision to try out a new support option to meet and connect with fellow survivors. I know for my husband in particular, and and I want to talk about male grief as well and acknowledge how different that is for a man and how helpless he felt after losing our son, and how difficult it was for him to reach out for support, because he felt like connecting with fellow survivors would be a step backwards. He thought, how could this possibly help me? I have enough. I have all the pain I can handle. How is listening to other people, talk about their experience with loss going to be beneficial to me? And he didn't want to for a long time. And then we did meet with fellow survivors, and, he just kind of sat and he listened. And then he started participating and interacting, and it ended up being something that was so relieving to him because he knew he wasn't alone. So I guess there's that element of solidarity, right? When you walk into this room, there's that element of I'm not different, and I don't have to explain myself. Everybody in this room absolutely is in my position. At one point in their lives, they felt exactly what I'm experiencing right now. And so there's that beautiful solidarity when they walk into this room.
You mentioned something, that was a really lovely answer, by the way, thank you. You mentioned something off the top in terms of the community that you feel in this space. And so one of the things that I think is a common theme in the podcast too is that the people I'm fortunate to speak with are really big believers in community, but it takes a lot of work to create community, and obviously you're very good at it. I'm wondering how did you go about creating this community? Like, what were some of the intangible things that you needed to make this a safe space, to make this a space where people, like you said, felt welcomed and felt like they could just be themselves? Like, that doesn't just happen. So how did you do it?
Well, it was such a long process, Eric. Oh my goodness. So Anne-Jeanette Corbet, who I mentioned earlier, is the co-creator of Healing to the Max, and she also is the mother of my son Max's best friend. So she is the mother of Aiden. And Aiden and Max were best friends from very, very young. I mean, they weren't even potty trained yet. And we grew up on the same street. So she was one of the neighbors who thankfully was not putting her garage door down when I walked by. And she would check in with me and she would say, how are you doing? Are you guys finding the correct forms of support? What are you doing for support? And so the more and more I spoke with Anne-Jeanette, the more we identified that there was a gap in services for families like my own. for parents, my husband and myself, and for our surviving children. There was zero grief support groups. And I looked in Canada for my children. So there was that gap in services. There were also long waiting lists. So we identified that there was a need for this type of support. And as I continued on my journey of healing, and those conversations with Anjanette continued, and we decided that this was something that we were going to do. We were going to go forward, and we were going to connect with the right people. So we did have a lot of meetings, and for myself, it was a really hard decision because my son was a teenager. He was 16, just over the age of 16 when he died. And I was so torn whether or not I would share his life in this public way. I didn't have his permission. I didn't have any way to get his permission. He's a beautiful young man. He was so generous in every sort of way. And I know everybody says these wonderful things when someone passes, but he was such a beautiful, energetic, helpful, empathetic, compassionate young man. And I knew that he was a doer, right? Like, he just was such an active person in our community. And his goals were post-secondary to travel to underdeveloped countries and improve their infrastructure through getting a degree in architecture, and he was going to help improve their standard of living. And I thought, okay, I don't have his skills. I do not have his talent for mathematics, and I certainly am past the point where I'm able to, well, we do travel globally, but for long extended periods. I cannot take on this as sort of legacy work for my son. But this is something that I can do, right? I can help families like Max's family. And so, and it was through our mutual friend, Joanne McGrath, who was able to encourage me that, yes, this was a positive step forward, and that this would be something that would be really well received. And so I made that decision, yes, I would go ahead and do this work collaboratively with my friend, my beautiful friend, Anjanette. And so we created the programs of hope and healing. And so we have one intensive for parents, that's a 12-week intensive. We have one designed specifically for youth and teens, ages 8 through 19 years. That's an 8-week intensive, which is where we meet once a week and we work on one complex aspect of this grieving process, and we build on the week before. I can get into more of the meat and the potatoes of our programs later, but it was just that gap in services that was really sort of something that became the creation of these programs, Eric. I had the means for, getting private support, for getting those counselors. But wait times are long, and people aren't necessarily trained in this type of traumatic loss. And so when we did finally meet with a counselor, that wasn't necessarily a good match, and it ended up being compounding. And when you're in crisis, it's a poor time to go window shopping for support. And so we really felt that call to create a meaningful place where survivors could come. And I mentioned that there was nothing for my surviving children, which is devastating to me. And one part that was compounding to my own grieving process was thinking about people who aren't in an urban setting, people who do not have the means for support, people in the northern communities, people who live, remotely, people who live on farms, people who live in small farming communities, people who live on those reserves in southern Saskatchewan. And I just couldn't reconcile with the fact that I had all the support. I had mountains of support from my friends and family. I could have gone anywhere in the city, in the city center, and I'm a diligent person. I will find that correct form of support. But what about those people who don't have what I have? And that was really the motivating factor for creating these programs. And so going through the steps, yeah, it's taken a lot. It's taken a number of years. I'm going into year 7 of survivorship, and this January, we're starting group number 4. So it's taken a lot. I don't know if your listeners really want to listen to all the ins and outs of how you become a nonprofit organization, but it's incredibly convoluted, and there's lots and lots of bumps in the road, and luckily I have a beautiful team. So, I'm not a one-woman sort of operation here. I have wonderful people, co-facilitators. You met my friend Loren and her husband Wayne, my own husband, Bev Shedden and Barb Clark. They're also former participants who felt the call to do this type of work and who are now co-facilitators for Healing to the Max. And so, as we grow, I think about where we came from, which was that place of how are we even going to do this? That's not an easy answer. It was really, we really had to talk to a lot of people and ask them if they wanted to participate, to add to this program. And thankfully, we have gotten more yeses than nos. We have gotten a few nos, but that's okay.
You talked a little bit about in your own journey, noticing the gaps in service, and in my time as a reporter at CBC, I had I would say the privilege of speaking with a few families who have experienced loss like you have, and that was something that they quickly mentioned to me, and I'm just curious, in your years, Jill, is that kind of a common theme that you hear from other families in terms of just perhaps being so grateful for this because there is a gap out there?
Oh, certainly. Oh, goodness. Everyone who connects with our programs of hope and healing, there's certainly a beautiful expression of gratitude and that we're so appreciative of. And so that in itself is its own reward, right? It's just a reason to keep going forward and doing those business end of things, which are quite tedious to myself. I would rather just do the facilitation side and work one-on-one with people, but there is that business end of things that one needs to take care of as well. But right from the beginning, when our son expressed that he thought he was struggling with a depression, that was certainly something that we faced as a family. And we know people. We are family friends with people in that world, in that community of mental health, of support. And we still were put on daunting wait lists. And so, is that a common theme? I would say we meet with all types of survivors, Eric. We meet with people who have had challenges with the mental health system, absolutely. We also meet with people who have had absolutely no idea their loved one was struggling with suicidal ideation. So I think that to answer your question honestly, yes. I would say there's sort of that resounding residual, there is a system that just isn't working and failing people like ours, like our own loved ones and ourselves as survivors. Yes.
I'm looking around this room, and you have been so gracious to set this up. Would this be kind of like a setup that if I were coming to one of the sessions, this is what you're nodding your head, so yeah.
Yes.
So there's tables set up, and then I see there's almost like, would you say like workspaces, or like, is this sort of like, feel free to get into the nuts and bolts. Like I'm so curious. Like what all am I looking at? Like what would a person do if they came out to one of your sessions?
So our sessions are weekly. So once a week we meet, and how it works is when we do meet in person and and today we are meeting in person in the space where we held our first parent intensive. Parent, guardian, and grandparent, pardon me. I want to be clear that anyone who's in that parental role, and we've had all three. We've had parents, grandparents, and guardians participate in our intensives. And so when you walk in, you'll see tables that are set up, and every week we'll give you a work manual. So that's something that you get is, our weekly sort of agenda of what we're going to address in that evening session. And we have coffee and tea and munchies out there all the time so participants can get whatever they need for their bodies. They can take a break whenever they need so they can go outside and get a breath of fresh air. There's washrooms available here. And so, and we do take body breaks, throughout because we're doing really heavy work. Really heavy emotional work. And then we do have a table that's set up with a whole bunch of things that look like you're walking into a kindergarten classroom, but it's our arts and crafts sort of section. So for example, it's just sort of on the side of you there, Eric. On our very first session, you'll get a little sort of mason jar and an illuminary, sort of a little light. And you can pick out your loved one's favorite color, or something a color you associate with your loved one, and you can make a name tag for them, and you can decorate their jar and turn on their little light and have that sitting beside you as you're doing this healing work. So we incorporate a lot of things like art therapy. And in every session, we do have a project that we work on, whether that's a visualization exercise or an art project. Just depending on what session we're in, I have a couple of favorites, but we do things with clay, we do things with canvas and paint. You do not have to have any level of art history, or I see you laughing because normally our men are very like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me, ladies? Yeah. But Brian, is very gracious in sharing his example. My husband is what he has done for an art project as opposed to what I'll do. And so that really puts people at ease, right? There's a whole range of things that you can do to express in these particular projects that we introduce. We also, at the end of the session, have journal reflection questions. So we do teach journaling, and we do encourage that, and I know that can be really intimidating for some people, but it's not, we're not sending you home saying, okay, write about your feelings. Because I think, and I don't want to categorize a particular gender, but men in particular are very, I would say, they have a high degree of trepidation when it comes to things like talking about their feelings, let alone writing about them. They're doers. They're fixers. They'll see a hole in a fence and they'll say, right, I need a board, I need some nails, I need a particular hammer, and I'm going to go fix this. But what do you do if you don't have those tools? What if the problem, you're looking at it and you don't have those tools, and you don't even know which tools to go to the store and buy? And you're looking at it, and you're so helpless. I feel an incredible amount of compassion for our male survivors, for our grandpas, our fathers, our stepfathers, our uncles. They just are so helpless in this situation. So when they come and they learn these techniques, it's just like they're like, okay, right. I've come to the store and I've got my tools, and this crazy lady is telling me that this is helpful. I'm going to give it a whirl.
But do you see those light bulb moments?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. Oh, and they're brilliant and beautiful. And so a weekly session. So we have our weekly group, right? And we also connect with our survivors through a private service that we set up. Like, it's a messenger service. So if everybody's using the Facebook Messenger, we'll create a private group. If everybody's using a Snapchat, and that's really popular for the youth and teens, right? So we'll use that as our messenger so that everybody stays connected and we can check in with you. So halfway through the week, one of our facilitators we'll check in with our participants and say, how's your week going? Is there anything that you're struggling with? How can we help you? And so, we do have our binder, and yeah, it's on my lap. It's been on my lap the whole time because I love our program so much. But, where we do have our set agenda, it's the creation of that community of support that is so vital, right? Where we can offer that to our participants. They have that connectivity, and they can call on one of us at any point. And if something comes up, we're going to be there for them.
That's an interesting point, because it's not only, I would assume anyways, people that come to your groups, it's not only looking to you as a support person, but now you're, like you said, you're a part of this community. And do you see those relationships forming between one father here and a father there, or grandpa here, grandpa there? Yeah.
Yes. My husband has a group of men that he meets with regularly. And this has been going on for years, and it grows, right? So the men go off and they do their thing, and sometimes we meet as families together. This recent group that we had online, we offered via Zoom because of COVID protocols. And for safety, we had a lot of people join us from the States. We had a participant from Virginia, we had one from Arizona, one from Vancouver, Washington. So we had, those sets of parents join us remotely, and that was really beautiful. And at the end of that group, one of our participants, she's here in Saskatoon, she said, wouldn't it be great if we could all meet in person someday? And then the September long weekend, everybody came, and we met. And so Brian and I opened our home, and we had a few meals there. We had some backyard fires. We went out to Cranberry Flats. We did some hiking. We did some just really, really beautiful healing activities together. But we also just kind of hung out as friends. And I know we're going to be lifelong friends.
What was that like? Because it's one thing to say, oh yeah, let's get together someday. But lots of people say that, and it never happens. And yet, you've got people from across North America, and they came to Saskatoon in September.
It was that mic drop moment. Yeah. And we had this one participant, and I know she wouldn't mind myself sharing this with you. She lost her husband by suicide 17 years ago, and then she was newly bereaved again. She lost her one and only beautiful, beloved son by suicide, and I don't know how she became connected with our program, but she gave me a call and she said, I need help. And I said, that's okay, we're here for you. And she participated in this last intensive. So she went from a place of struggling with her own suicidal ideation, which is incredibly common for a bereaved parent of this type of loss. I certainly experienced it myself. And so when she said, wouldn't it be great if we could all get together, and to hear her express that she was thinking about the future. She was making a plan for, wouldn't it be great if we could do this? We just sort of, we all kind of debrief as facilitators after our participants have left that virtual room. We stay on and we have a chat. And I just sort of sat back and I made that motion. I'm like, that's our mic drop moment. That woman who was so unsure whether she would even survive. To make a plan for the future was just such a beautiful, beautiful validation that we're going in the right direction with this program. Yeah.
And my apologies if this is kind of a silly question, but is everyone coming to the program? Are they looking for the same thing in terms of is it as simple as saying I want to feel better, or are they looking for specifically to work on a few things? Or because I know and like you've said a couple of times, it's a lifelong, but obviously, maybe people want to have some goals within the 12 weeks that they do. I'm just so curious, how do people approach this? And this is so out of my comfort zone that, I don't know, I'm not asking the question properly, but hopefully
Yes, you are.
okay.
And I totally understand what you're saying, and I said it when you first walked in the door today. Thank you so much for being brave enough to make yourself vulnerable in this way, because this isn't your world. And I certainly wouldn't be here if I had a choice, so thank you so much for your bravery today. I would say everybody shows up in different states. Our men are usually very stoic. They're very sort of, I'm here to support her, right? I'm here, but I'm going to support her. And to see them sort of, open up and share their own sort of individual experience and their own feelings is a really magical thing. But everybody does have I would say, are at different levels or different stages or different phases. I wouldn't say levels or stages is correct. I would say more what is fitting is they're at different levels of healing. We have people who have joined us as new as 4 weeks into their bereavement journey, and we've had survivors as long as 7 years join us, and that's our beautiful Bev Shedden, who's now a valuable, amazing facilitator of this program. She had lost her beautiful son, Jamie, 7 years prior to taking our parent intensive. And so everybody's at a different stage. And so I would say everybody has something in their heart that they're carrying that is niggling, that is something that they can't wrap their mind around, that is something that they can't reconcile with, that they're having difficulty with, and they just don't know how to get or crack that on the head, right? And so to identify all those different complex things, this would be a whole nother podcast. But, I would say, yes, that's a really valid question. Everybody has their own goals within the healing journeys. And, this is a very comprehensive program. We don't leave any stone unturned. If it is something that I thought of or I struggled with or... and even Anjanette, who's the professional connected with this program, even she said, "Are you sure you want to put that in, Jill? That's going to be rough on them." And I said, "It is going to be rough on them, but if they don't do it within this supportive, empathetic environment, with the support of the facilitators, it's going to come up at some point. It could be months from now, it could be years from now." But then they're going to be alone.
May I ask an example, like what a rough thing might be?
I think one of the roughest things that I have put in this program is the unit where we speak on everything that is known about our loved one's death. Everything that is known. Not things that we've made up in our mind, not things that, our shame and guilt have maybe added in, but every factual thing that we know about our loved one. And I say loved one because in this program, we teach it through the lens of narrative therapy, which is to say that we encourage not that traditional concept of closure, like you would in grief, right? There's those 5 stages of grief, which were identified by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and we all know them, right? And then that bespeaks of, okay, right, you get to that stage of acceptance and it's over. And then you just have this, beautiful life where you live again. And where I do think you do have a life where you live again, I do think that that's something that happens. I do think that grief is something that you're going to take with you. It doesn't mean to say that it's going to look the same or be the same. But so narrative therapy approaches it from a different angle, and it says, what if we don't have to say goodbye? What if we can say hello again? And so we have this concept where we reinforce that loving, enduring, everlasting connection to our loved one. We don't have to say goodbye. We can accept their death. As a mother, there is absolutely no part of me on a very basic cellular level that doesn't understand my son has died. I feel that. Whether I'm asleep or whether I'm awake, my body knows that he's not here. And so I think when people think that you have to have closure, they think, oh, she just can't accept it. There's that, she can't accept that. Believe me, there is on no level any misunderstanding or misconception that my son is dead in the physical form, and that I will also make my physical transition. I'm an organic being. We all are. And so there's no delusion there. But in this approach, through a narrative approach, you can say, but what if I bring that person with me into that acceptance phase? And so we say loved one instead of loved one, past tense, because we don't believe that love ends. And we don't feel that, So, and there's no reason for us to say goodbye to someone who we love, and especially as parents, more than our own lives. There's no reason for that. And so it's a brand new approach to grief and loss. So I think that has been a really healing, beautiful, and it just creates such a wonderful foundation for these programs of hope and healing. And narrative therapy was first introduced by two social workers, Michael White from Australia and David Epstein, who's a Canadian, actually. He was born in Peterborough, I believe, Ontario. So he's originally from Canada. He lives in New Zealand right now. And so they recognized those 5 stages of grief that we're all so familiar with. But when Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was doing her work, she based that on a patient who was terminally ill. And it's important work, and it's so valuable. And all those things that she talks about, the depression phase, you go into bargaining, all those things. I certainly did experience them, but there was no particular order. And on any given day, I could feel in any given moment like I was experiencing a myriad of those stages, right? It's not 1 through 5, and it wasn't even based on somebody who was bereaved. It was based on someone who was accepting a terminal diagnosis. So this is a brand new sort of approach, and it's been really, really amazing to watch our participants respond to it. Really beautiful.
You are listening to episode 5, season 4 of YXE Underground. My name is Eric Anderson, and my guest is Jill Cowan of the Healing to the Max therapeutic program. You can follow and listen to YXE Underground on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, yxeunderground.com, or wherever you find your podcasts. And you can also follow YXE Underground on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, which is where you'll see some lovely photos of Jill taken by Saskatoon photographer Molly Shakowski. Don't forget to leave a 5-star review if you like what you hear. Healing to the Max started small, but as you heard Jill mention, there are people from across North America now enrolling in the program. This is exciting to Jill as she has big plans for the program, which includes making connections with Indigenous communities in northern Saskatchewan and within Saskatoon schools. In the last part of our conversation, Jill shares her goals for Healing to the Max and why she's okay with feeling exhausted after a therapy session. We pick up our conversation with Jill sharing some of her favorite aspects of the program, which just so happen to tap into a person's creativity.
I don't think it's a bad day when you can do something creative and when you can make something, and especially for a person who's in a bereaved state. I don't think that this is a term that is really even correct, but I would call it acute grief, where and that could be when you're newly bereaved, that could be 10 years down the road. It just doesn't matter, right? If you're in an acute state of grief, I think creating something is really amazing. Some of my favorite projects would be I love the painting that we do, which is if you could express what grief and joy could look like hand in hand, what would that look like? And so we've gotten some really beautiful results, and everybody's is so unique, and that's what I love, because I love to draw and copy things, and I'm really good at copying things and restoring things that other people have made, and I can do that really easily, but original creativity is something that I struggle with. So to see everybody have some different perspective on that, that's a really great one. What if you could paint a picture or draw a picture of what grief and joy could look like hand in hand? What would that look like? That's a really favorite one of mine. And another favorite project of mine is the Masks We Wear project, which is where we do a project, and it could be just on a simple paper plate, or whatever we have available for that particular session. But you draw or paint or markers, or whatever medium you want to use. You do the face of what you're showing to the outside world. The face you're showing to the outside world versus on the reverse side of that paper plate, what you actually feel on the inside. And then how do we get those two to look more similar? And then we have, a follow-up with every art project that we do, right? And one of the follow-ups, we have a lot of short answer questions with the Mask We Wear. And those questions, are everything from, when is it helpful for us to wear a mask? Who are we protecting when we wear our masks? What would it feel like if we were able to show the world what we look like on the inside, as opposed to that outer look? So, there's always follow-up to it. It's not like, oh, make something pretty and that's it. We really do get into it. So, yeah, in a comprehensive, really profound way.
Okay.
Yeah.
May I ask, it is so clear that how empathetic and caring a person you are, and I'm wondering, with this work that you do, is it invigorating, or can it be exhausting at times, or can it be both, at the same time? Because it's clear you've put your heart and soul into this, and it's intense. I'm just for your How do you do this?
Oh, that's such a lovely question, and thank you so much. And when I'm looking at you, I can almost see Anjanette looking at me, right? Because she is the professional, and she's always like, Jill, she's always giving me the check-ins. Are you okay? Mm-hmm. Are you going to be taking some time off over the holidays? And so my answer to that is, where I do feel tired, right? I do feel that fatigue from putting on something of this magnitude, of this level. I would say it's just such a beautiful fatigue, and so welcoming, and not something that's draining or taking away or negative in any sort of way. It's a good tired. I would liken it to, our forefathers who came and worked the land, and they had a successful crop, and they were going to survive that winter because they had that bounty, and they were tired because they did that work, but it was necessary. And so I think that's how I would explain it. Yes, I'm really super tired. Such a good tired, such a beautiful tired, and I'm so grateful for that fatigue. And so I do have so many beautiful people around me. You met a herd of my friends who just came out on a Sunday to help me today. And I have people who are looking out for me. My own parents are blessedly still alive and so supportive. And my 3 brothers, my own children, my niece, my husband, and everyone who's connected to this program in a professional way is always checking in. And I always do get that slap on the wrist if I'm going too far. It's time for you to book that trip to Mexico or whatever. I am absolutely good at being really hands-on and full-on, and I'm completely devoted and dedicated. And then I'm really good at turning off as well and enjoying myself. So I think I have a good balance.
And you mentioned your support team too. I am curious, what your 2 children think of the work that you do, and why it is so important to you. What do they think?
I think that they are grateful that there's a form of support available that was not available for them. That is something that they have both been very proud of. And I think that they're young adults right now, and they're really engrossed in their education and their own journeys right now. But they're certainly cheering from the sidelines, loudly, and so supportive, and give a lot of love, that this is a part of their beloved brother's legacy now. That's certainly something that is really special for them. I don't think that this is the only thing that's going on, to honor the life and legacy of Max. He had a really big life in his 16 years, and a lot of people cared about him. So there's definitely other things going on, but this is a beautiful sort of foil to his legacy, and I think they're really proud, really proud.
I like the word legacy. I think it's a powerful word, and I think it has such a great connotation to it, because, I think you're leaving your mark on the world, and so I like that you've mentioned that several times. So, I'm curious. Maybe this sort of ties in terms of the mark you're hoping to leave. Like how. I know COVID has obviously changed things a little bit for the program, but like you said, you've told that wonderful story about how you've connected with people across North America now, and then you're hosting groups because they're getting together, and that wouldn't have happened before. How would you like to see this program continue to grow, Jill?
Well, there's several different ways that it's growing. One of our facilitators has been invited to a beautiful conference in Arizona this summer, and she's going to be speaking on behalf of our program down there with the I believe it's the Helping Parents Heal chapter that's hosting a conference down in America, and David Kessler is going to be attending. He is really, really resolute, sort of relevant right now grief expert in the world. And so she's been invited to that conference, so she'll be going there. And Jeanette and I are hopeful to copyright the program. So, and we're hopeful to have it translated into different languages. We do have some interest in Europe and beyond. Actually, we've had people interested as far as China. Australia, there's been some interest globally as well. So we are hopeful to get, the funding so that we can hire a beautiful lawyer who will copyright the program for us for peanuts. And, that's definitely a goal of ours. Another incredibly, and right from the beginning, one of my major goals of creating this and really making that leap and making ourselves public in this way was the hope to go to our northern communities. So Anjanette and I have been in talks with the FSIN a couple of times, and we've had some interest from different First Nations. Red Pheasant First Nation is one who's hopeful to do a pilot project. Of course, COVID has changed things for us right now, but we're definitely going to want to teach this program and make it available to the mental health professionals in those communities so that when need arises, they can run an intensive. Maybe they do it once a week like we do it for 12 consecutive weeks, or maybe they shorten the timelines and do it 3 times a week, or whatever works in their community. So our hope is to be able to do a lot of things like that, and to put on healing events and have retreat weekends. And we've been in contact with a few other people within the grief support community throughout the province, and we're hopeful to collaborate with them, and we have some interest in Regina, and really there hasn't been a community that hasn't reached out in our own province, but we are definitely looking beyond that, and prevention is also suicide prevention is another area we're incredibly interested in facilitating a project, a meaningful project. And if anybody is listening to this and you work on the school board, you will know how to get in touch with me, and I will love to talk to you because I have some beautiful ideas that we could bring into the high school level for Mental Health Week, and that's in May. And so, I definitely have some goals on how the program will go. Going forward, right now we're going into our next parent intensive. That's going to start mid-January. We're taking registrations right now. We will run a youth and teen group again in the spring, and we'll see if we can work on that beautiful project of prevention that I have cooked up in my Jill brain for the Mental Health Week at the school level. I think if you approach anything from the angle of love and support and compassion and, awareness in general, sort of, comprehensive, goodness, wanting people to be able to find those outlets of support that they need, and normalizing things like saying the word suicide. Saying the word suicide is not going to make your children die by suicide. What it will do for someone struggling with suicidal ideation, whether they're a young person or an older person, it is going to be relieving for them to be able to speak about these thoughts that they're having. And in our program, we always refer to them as sneaky, slimy, suicidal thoughts. They're convincing the person that one of two things: either A, this is the best option, or B, this is the only option. And they're lying to you. And so I think a lot of our young people in particular don't know where to start when they're struggling. They don't know where to go for help. They don't know how to ask for help. And a lot of the help we get is going to take you a step backwards. We talked a little bit about that. We sort of briefly touched that in the beginning of our conversation today. The system is a little disjointed. I have my own sort of thoughts on this. I do believe that if anybody was struggling with life or death, a healthcare professional would be empathetic to that and want to get them the help that they need. But a lot of the times their hands are tied. Lack of funding, lack of resources, lack of staff, lack of people interested in living in this remote part of the world. All these different types of problems and challenges we face. And a lot of times the young people don't have the language either to even know where to begin. And sometimes, if we're clinging to our support network at home and we're barely hanging on, the thought of going to the hospital is going to compound that. Now I'm going to be separated from my friends who I like to hang out with during the day. Now I'm going to have to leave my TV and my gaming system behind because that's been working for me to help me fall asleep at night. I'm not going to have those things. I'll just try to tough it out. And that's when we get to the crisis point. And I think it's really important that our program, now that we do have this platform and we are connecting with families, just like my very own, a large thing that we're noticing is people do have that passion to work in the area of advocacy, the area of prevention. And so it would be really beautiful if we could come together and have something that was really powerful and really meaningful, instead of just wear your pink shirt day, which is a one-day thing, and everybody loves to participate, and I love it. And I love Bell Let's Talk Day, and I love all these initiatives that are coming out and helping to change the outdated stigma, the outdated narrative around mental health. But every day, 10 Canadians will die by suicide, 10 a day. By the time this podcast is finished airing, 300 Canadians will have died by suicide. And I think that for families like my own, you can heal and you can grieve, and you will continue to grieve your entire life, but they want to take that next step to make sure that there isn't going to be another family like their own. And so I think it's really important for us as a community and as a complete support program to be able to offer that option to families. So I have some ideas, Eric.
You mentioned like the Jill brain, and I feel very grateful for the opportunity to learn a little bit about the Jill brain, but to speak with you today, and you were ever since I reached out to you via email, you've been so kind and empathetic and caring towards me and making me feel comfortable, when really it's like, as the interviewer, that's my job to do that for you. So I just want to say thank you for taking the time to speak with me today. And I think the work that you and your team are doing is so important. And I love that how you ended with talking about advocacy and wanting to, it's one thing, like you said, Pink Shirt Day and Bell Let's Talk Day, those are great days, but what about all the other days? And let's go and do things. And spending a couple hours with you today, like, you're gonna get stuff done. So
I'm gonna get stuff done. It might not be linear, and it might not be neat and tidy, but it's definitely happening. So, and I'm not opposed to people saying no. I just, I say thank you, and I move on, and I keep going until someone says yes. So yeah, it's definitely going in a beautiful direction. And as you say, I have that beautiful team of support as well.
Jill, thank you so much for this. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Eric. Thank you.
You have been listening to episode 5, season 4 of YXC Underground. My name is Eric Anderson. I host, produce, and edit this local independent podcast. Thank you again to Jill Cowan for being so generous with your time and appearing on the podcast. And I strongly encourage you to visit healingtothemax.org to learn more about the program. And you can also find the program on Facebook. You can follow and listen to YXC Underground on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, yxcunderground.com, or wherever you find your podcasts. You can also follow YXC Underground on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, which is where you'll see some wonderful photos of Jill taken by my friend and Saskatoon photographer, Molly Shakosky. Don't forget to leave a 5-star review if you like what you hear. I want to thank the team at Danger Dynamite for maintaining the website, and I also want to thank my cousin Andrew Dixon for creating the original theme music. Before I go, I would like to acknowledge that this interview was recorded on Treaty 6 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis. YXC Underground is a production of the Salthammer Production Company. My name is Eric Anderson. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you soon, Saskatoon.